last several months, and this is before campaign season really kicks into high gear, that Trump is beating Biden in almost every statistical measure, and it's only going to get worse the more his mental incapacities are exposed, the more that the policies that they've been lying about are exposed. And the fact of the matter is, Trump is one hell of a political actor. He really knows how to work the crowd. And Biden is not capable of doing that, and now more so than where he was just 3 years ago. And so now, while we're distracted, as a lot of these things tend to be, by these very, negligible differences between both sides, like you said, because they're basically two parties of capital, and one is just trying to outdo the other in terms of fear mongering, because that's all they really have at this point. We're getting stuck in a real fascist situation, which has nothing to do with either major political party. It has to do with the powers that be in this country that want to take over every major city in some type of a police state capacity.
Yeah.
And so no greater example of that than what is going on right now.
This is freaking me out.
Atlanta.
This is something.
Yes, this is.
With
Yes.
cops too. This is a very serious problem.
And this is, and you know what? And this is, like Pascal, you, I'm sure you see this. This isn't even a conservative, or this is a capital problem. This is a money problem, because that is what is standing to benefit from this, is more than anything, is the military-industrial complex. This is not partisan. This is not anything to do with, like, really electoral politics. This is
prosecutors in Georgia have filed racketeering charges against several dozen people, 61 to be exact, after a state investigation into ongoing local protests against a proposed police training facility that protesters have named Cop City, the Associated Press reports. A newly unsealed file dated August 29th of this year from the Fulton. So this is Fannie Willis's office that is doing this, indicting 61 people. The filing described these involved in opposing the training facility as anarchist and anti-police. The indictment accused those mentioned in the filing of arson, attacks on law enforcement officers, and destruction of government property. Again, they could just make up what's government property and what's not. The accusation comes under Georgia's racketeering law, which is also known as a RICO law. It is the very same law that was recently used to indict former President Donald Trump and several of his associates. Let me assure you of something before we continue. This is going to help Donald Trump in more ways than people can even begin to wrap their head around.
everything they do is a gift for him.
Absolutely. First of all, I just want to correct something. I think this charge was brought by the Attorney General of the state, not Fannie Willis. But the larger point, though, is that Cop City, there's a lot to understand about Cop City, is that Cop City is obviously a consequence of the rise of the post-COVID police state, in that after the social damage that happened after COVID that caused all these urban crises, I think there's a bipartisan understanding post-Black Lives Matter, post-George Floyd.
That's what I think it is.
That we got to rehabilitate the police and supporting the police bipartisanly. And I think they're actually trying to expand the Cop City concept to Baltimore right now. I've been checking about that. So this thing is very important to the ruling class in a time where the fear of increasing economic precarity is on the horizon. It's the need to realize we got to find a way to house the surplus redundant labor we're going to have when this economy starts to crash. So we're going to need to shut these people up so we can build these kind of Cop City metroplexes, if you will, to keep people on lock. So I definitely believe that the Democrats, who are drunk with the possibility that they can take Georgia, Atlanta, which is a city where all of their largely Democrat votes come from, is, and let's understand something. People talk about how Atlanta is, a kind of Black upper middle class elite mecca. There is a massive class difference amongst Black people in Atlanta, and it's one of the cities that's the best example of how the Black political class, what Black Agenda Report calls the Black misleadership class, uses the charade of black excellence to mask the actual way that they disregard the lives of poor and working class black people, which combines into the horrendous treatment that they get in the Fulton County Jail, which is another part of the story as well, where I was reading about how it is universally known that that jail is unlivable. They have cells with no toilets. It's literally crumbling. Since July, there have been 5 deaths, if not murders, in the Fulton County Jail. People can literally pick off the plaster in the jail, make weapons, and kill people. This happens in Fulton County Jail, okay? And they have had a serious rash of violence and death in these horrific conditions. And yet when recently interviewed, Fannie Willis says, I told people when I was running for office 15 years ago that we needed a new jail that would be humane. Like her response is that, well, I told people we needed a new jail 15 years ago, as if that solves the problem. So again, this is not only this is definitely a capitalist problem, but it's a class problem, and it's a class problem that exists within the black community that unfortunately likes to project this charade of the Black United Front. We all live this together against the white man, which has almost always been bullshit in this country and has been used as a mechanism to have black elites neutralize working class and poor black people and have their foot on their necks while they coalesce with the corporate Democrats into horrendous policy like this.
Yeah, this cop city is a really scary thing to me. I feel like this is something that we all need to take a stand on, because this is just the first of what they're going to start doing many. And I see it as a complete plan to clamp down on what they're anticipating is a lot of civil unrest. And I think what it really is very like imperial forces to me, and very scary. Not to mention that in this particular case, we're not even talking about the environmental issue at stake, which is that is a preserved green area that serves a function for the people of Atlanta, but which is a whole other like racial environmental justice problem as well. But it is not by chance that the first one of these facilities is going into, I think it is the largest percent, like of a city of its size, the greatest percentage of black population for a city of its size. And so I don't think that that's a coincidence, that that's where that's going.
You know, there's also the ramifications of poor electoral map strategizing on the Democratic Party's, part.
Absolutely.
I agree with you 100% that Georgia, for whatever reason, is going to be possibly even ground zero for the 2024 election. And that is a complete misfire, in my opinion, on the Democratic Party's part, because I think they're going to have a hard enough time maintaining the Rust Belt, which is ultimately where the election will probably be won and lost. And they can't afford to give up either Wisconsin or Pennsylvania. But one thing that
Arizona.
Or Arizona for that matter. But the one thing no one's talking about, not just a lot of people are going to talk about the fact that Virginia is most likely going to be in play next year. There's also the fact that Florida is basically a solid red state now at the statewide election level. So what that allows the GOP to do is not have to put tens of millions of dollars into a race to protect Rick Scott, or whoever's going to be the GOP candidate is going to easily win the 30 electoral votes in the state of Florida. That allows them to now siphon that money into other states like Georgia, like a state where now what you're doing as a result of Cop City, we all know what Governor Kemp is going to do, but Senators Ossoff and Warnock are basically doing the same thing. There is no difference. So you're not presenting an electoral argument for, well, if we just work our butts off again to make sure that this state stays blue, everything's going to be fine. That argument is going out the door now as a result of what they're doing here. And that's why in the case of what's happening as we continue. The Stop Cop City protests have gone on for years. The controversial city is a proposed police and firefighting training facility being built on a section of city-owned land called the Wulani Forest. The project is estimated to cost about $90 million, of which the residents are paying. The residents in the surrounding area are predominantly Black, what a surprise, and many are lower income. Opponents worry about losing green space and about the millions of dollars dedicated to bolstering bloated, militarized police force. And there is the key word, militarized police force, which has been happening since the worst president of our most likely lifetime, George W. Bush, where a lot of this really kicked into high gear. The project was first approved by the Atlanta City Council in 2021, and despite heavy opposition, the council approved funding for the center's construction this June.
Yeah.
Now, what, of course,
screw what the people want.
And of course,
screw the people.
What is the unifying theme here with the City Council of Atlanta? It is predominantly Democrat.
Yes, that's a good point.
So for anyone who's thinking that this is a red versus blue issue, no, this is a capital versus working class issue, and capital is winning and continues to win.
I feel like we can't let this happen. Apparently, there's some sort of action being planned in November. Something is going down in November as far as this being on their ballot or them being able to have like an initiative on this or something like that. But there's some sort of big action happening there in November. And if I'm anywhere here, if I'm here, I'm going to go, because I feel like we can't let them get Cop City through, because then there's just going to start being everywhere.
Pascal, Ben Franklin once said that those who are willing to give up liberty for security are entitled to neither. Why are we living in a time today where people are so ready, willing, and able to give up their liberty for security?
I think that the real answer to that question is because America has lost its knowledge of its radical history. And I'm not just talking about Black radical history. I'm talking about white working class radical history, American radical history, the radical movement politics that got us the New Deal, the radical politics that got us, Medicaid, Medicare, the Great Society, and all that stuff. The radical politics that ended Jim Crow, the coalitional politics between Black and white folk that help always make things better for Americans overall. Those ideas are lost because the media, the schools, no one teaches that stuff. You're not going to learn that in college. You're not going to learn that anywhere unless you take like maybe some radical left, like labor courses. But you've got to get that political education on your own to understand, that there have been legions of people over American history that try to challenge this stuff. And unfortunately, the thing that fears the ruling class the most is us returning to those memories and tactics.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.